Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the October 9th, 2018 Clutter Conversation webcast. I'm your moderator, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas. Our topic today is Your Organized Studio. Take creativity to the next level. Gayle will share a few thoughts on the subject, and then we'll have time for your questions. If you have a question before Gayle has finished her presentation, feel free to share it via chat, and I'll ask it at the appropriate time, or you can use the raise hand feature to let me know that you'd like to ask the question yourself via audio or video. Okay, Gayle, over to you.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. How you doing? It's fall again, and the quilt festival is back in Houston. I recently got invited to speak to the Quilt Guild of Greater Houston that puts on the Houston International Quilt Festival every year, and let me just tell you, that's a room full of serious crafters in there. The group is about 300 strong, I think, and when I'm invited to talk to them, I have a great time with them. I was asked to speak to them in prior years, and so this time when I was talking about what was I going to speak to the group about, I said, okay, we've already covered how to organize your studio. What would you like me to talk about next? And she asked two very surprising questions for me to contemplate as a conversation. One of them was, how do you know when you have too much? And the second one was how to pre-plan for new purchases. Pre-plan your organizing for new purchases that are coming in, because we're always a week away from the next, binging shopping spree at some festival, retreat, or whatever. So when she sent those questions over, first off, I laughed out loud because I thought, of course, a serious crafter wants to know, how do you know when you've got too much? She was wanting to know how, you don't judge yourself about all the stuff that you have. So I laughed about it, but then I started thinking about it in earnest, and I have to say, for those of you that follow the channel, you may know this already, but I am a beater. That's my hobby, and I've been doing it for about 25 years, and I have half of a living room set up as a studio in my house, and so I have a big, huge quantity of supplies in there, and let me tell you, I have enough to open my own bead store. So I totally get the passion in which you embrace your craft and the passion in which you shop for supplies, and the idea that if you see it and it's fabulous, you're going to buy it even though you have no clue what you're going to use it for. It's like, I love it, I got to have it, it's coming home. What are you going to do with it? No idea. You buy supplies and they sit there for a decade, and then suddenly they become part of a project. And this is when you've been crafting for a long time and you're really into it, and this is how you like to be creative. Let me just tell you, I totally get the whole buy it and make the stash ever larger all the time. I also need to say that anyone who's asking those questions, the idea of how do you know if you have too much, anybody that's asking that question is also a serious crafter. If you are a casual crafter, you have just gotten started, you're in no way ready to ask those kinds of questions. Like, at what point have I gone off the deep end, right? So if you are at the stage where you can ask those questions, then you are into it. It's a creative flow for you. It's something that you do for inspiration and fun. It feeds your soul. It's how you enjoy, part of how you enjoy life. And so it's something that you want to put resources in and put time into, and have it be something that you can do and keep up with and enjoy. Some of you are super organized about it. Some of you are not so organized about it. So let me just say, having been in a lot of craft studios, I can probably tell you what a serious crafter's craft studio looks like. So I'm going to paint a little picture here. If you have a closet in the space where you are crafting, that closet is completely stuffed to the gills and you can't get another thing in it. And you probably have stuff in all of the closets in other parts of the house as well. Like, it's creeping into every available storage space in the house. There will be things on table set up, and there'll be things on the table, there'll be things under the table. Any available cabinet space is full, and you keep adding furniture, hoping that the next piece of furniture will hold enough supplies to manage it. You've tried 5 different organization systems and you're still not happy with it. It's still not exactly right. These are the signs of somebody that has been working on it for a long time. Some of you are super organized about it. And what I mean by that is your room is really tricked out. You have lots of furniture that is got equipment set up on it. You have lots of cabinet space and storage containers and storage pieces that you can put your stuff away in. It's very neat looking and clean looking. Or it's at least got a lot of compartments and it's all put away in little compartments. You may have all of your equipment set out. If you're a quilter, for instance, you might have all your sewing machines out, or if you have a bunch of tools, you might have all the tools set out. That end of the spectrum is the room is all organized and super laid out special. And then the other end of the spectrum is it's completely out of control. You've totally lost control of the room and it's completely empty. And most people would say that the super organized person is the one that doesn't have too much, or the person that has control of it in that way is the person that doesn't have too much. And the person that's lost control is the one that needs help and has reached the limit of having too much. But truthfully, in my experience, that's not exactly correct. The first person is super organized and has put it all away, but the person that has chaos in their room and it's completely crazy may be one of those people that gets a flash of inspiration and runs into the room and can move things out of the way and dive straight in. I went and talked to, years ago, to the Quilt Guild in Wimberley, and I was talking about an organized space, and I always recommend that you have a clear working surface so that when you get inspiration, when you get a flash of, I want to do this project, you have a clean surface and you can dive right in and start working on it. And while I was giving that advice to the group in Wimberley, one of the ladies snickered and she raised her hand and she said, when I want to start a new project, I just put my arm on the table and sweep everything off onto the floor and I'm ready to go. I was like, oh my God, that makes me crazy. But she's a perfect example of the clutter isn't getting in the way of her creativity. So the idea that it has to be in perfect pockets and perfectly arranged versus total chaos is getting in the way isn't exactly true. So I like my bead supplies to be all organized and good. And that's because that's how I'm wired, right? Like that's what I do for a living. That's how I feel comfortable to work. But that's not true for everybody, and you may be just as comfortable working in a mess. So regardless of how do you keep your studio, how do you answer the question, do I have too much? At what point do I have too much? So let me ask these questions of you and see if they help you decide. Do you feel creative at all right now, or do you feel shut down? If you're feeling shut down, that might be a sign that you have reached your limit, that you've got too much and it's in the way. Do you feel that creativity drain away when you go into your studio? So if you feel excited and creative outside of the studio, and then you walk into the studio and it goes, the curtain drops and everything turns off, that may be a sign that you've got too much. You've reached your maximum capacity. Do you find yourself walking in and turning around and walking out? Like the idea of facing the room is too much and it's too overwhelming? Do you rebuy supplies because you can't find the ones you know you have? Now, how many times have you stood at a store and said, I'm going to buy these because I know I have some, but I don't know where they are? And then you buy them again and again and again because you keep replenishing what is missing in the room. Do you have tons of bags of supplies from previous shopping trips that aren't unpacked? That is the number one issue that I find when I go into craft rooms, is that people are shopping and they're bringing home their bag from the festival, the fair, the bead store, the retreat, the whatever, and they bring it home and they dump it in the room, but they don't unpack it. And then 6 months later, they've forgotten what they bought and it's not put away and they have no idea what's going on, right? So shopping, and this is why I did the short film earlier about this, bringing your stuff home and putting it into the room and not feeling like you can do something with it is another sign that you've sort of reached your mental capacity, right? In the last 6 months, have you worked on a project or maybe taken a class, or have you just shopped? I have a couple friends that what they really do, what their hobby really is bead shopping, not bead doing. So, it's much more fun for them to acquire the supplies than it is to actually sit down and work with the supplies. So, if you're mostly shopping, you're not creating anything, you really have to ask yourself if this is your real hobby. Shopping is your real hobby instead of the quilt or the beading or the paper crafting. If you don't think that's it, then you have to ask what's getting in the way creatively. It could be what's happening in your life. When my mother died in 2014, my creative juice just turned off. It went to sleep for at least a year. I couldn't do anything. I would sit down with my friends to bead, and there would be a project on the table, and it's like, yeah, I can't really face that. I can't deal with that. And so I worked on one stitch a row. I made a chain of bead weaving. I did the same stitch over and over and over again. I did it until it was about 3 feet long, and that every time we got together, that's all I worked on. I just worked on that one chain because that was all of the mojo that I had, but it was because of my emotional state. Anybody that knows me knows that normally beating the same thing over and over and over again, super repetitive, would make me insane. But this is the kind of work, this is all I had to give to being creative. That's how low level the creative juice was at that moment. And your emotional stuff will get in the way, right? It could be that you've got too many supplies to manage. Most of the people, I'm going to guess, come and listen to a talk like this because they feel like they don't know how to manage what they have. And if you've got enough stuff in the room, regardless of how organized it is, but if it's enough stuff that it's reached your personal level of overwhelm, like it's too big for you to manage, it's too big for you to contemplate cleaning or resetting or playing with, the idea of going and touching it all makes you want to scream and leave the room. That's the signal that you've got too much. It isn't that it needs to be all neat and organized to be creative or for you to be able to work. It's that the amount that's there has now reached and crossed above the threshold of your ability to visually look at, physically manage, and mentally visualize as a project and how to cope with it. And those things will shut you down creatively, totally. You've reached your saturation point. It was the thing that I said here. If you let the room get more out of control than your brain can handle and still function, then that's why you're feeling overwhelmed and it's time for a reset. Which brings us to the second question. How do you pre-plan shopping for your next event at a retreat or a festival? Before a big shopping opportunity is the perfect time to reset the studio. It's the perfect time to dive in and decide, okay, I need to, put things away and put the tools back and clean, burst up the tail ends of that last project and slide around and see if, what kind of supplies. Do I have 37 of that thread color? Do I really have, 27 tubes of that black bead? And at what point when I go shopping and see that color of bead again, I need to leave it there because I already have it 27 times. This is the perfect time if you go and spend time to fondle. I think of it as fondling, right? If I go in and play with beads on my table, I feel like I'm fondling the jewels, right? I'm playing with the stuff that makes me laugh and have fun. So going into your room, the studio, the act of touching the supplies reminds you what you have and what you have multiples of because it's your favorite color or material or pattern or whatever. And it puts that in your mind so that when you're shopping, you remember that you have 47 of those. Unpacking the bags from the last shopping trips reminds you that you did indeed buy, those spools of thread that you thought you needed to have, or that you did buy that tool that you've been thinking about, you actually did get it and you don't need to get it again, things like that. We forget, we get shopping, we're working along and we're hanging out, shopping with our friends, and our friends are saying, yeah, you got to get that. That looks great. That looks just like you. I know my friends help me shop and they'll be standing somewhere and go, Gayle, come over here. Look, this is your color. And like, you don't need to help me spend my money, but we all do. We help our friends spend their money. So you have shopping trips that you don't remember what you bought, and unpacking them gives you that fondling experience. It helps you put them away and feel like you know what you've got again. Clearing the studio also reminds you what you're almost out of. Like, oh, I forgot I'm almost out of that wire. Oh yeah, I don't have any. I used up all the orange on that project, whatever. Putting the remnants away of what you've just done or the last few projects that you've just done gives you an idea of where you have deficits and where you have a legitimate reason to fill in somewhere with new purchases. My point is to get into the space and very purposely don't create something. Go in there to familiarize yourself with what's there. You're opening the bags and boxes, you're refolding fabric, you're reorganizing the threads. If all of that resetting, recategorizing gives you an idea of where you've sort of gone off the deep end and bought too many of something, and where you really have not addressed or filled in like you want on another material. So I go in and because I go and play with people once a month, and I go to a couple of retreats a year, and I'm going out of town and for 4 or 5 days on an event, and coming home with unfinished projects and new supplies that I purchased and new sets of instructions and all that stuff. I will spend some time being in the room just integrating that stuff back into place. And that is sort of like a resting space for your mind. I don't know exactly how to describe it, except that it feels like I'm resting as I'm sitting in there and I'm playing, and I'm not making a demand on myself to remember the stitch, to make a color match, to get in there and follow a set of instructions and move a project along. I don't have an agenda. I'm just in there quietly putting things up and resetting things back in the studio. And I find that really gives you a much cleaner reset. When you clear off the table and put everything away, you've reoriented yourself with how much you have in the room. You end up with a better creative place. You're in a better creative place, and you feel like you have enough, or have exactly how much, or you don't have too much. I guess as creative people, we're always going to answer that question: can you really have too much? Is it really too much? And the answer is yes, you can have too much when it becomes more than you're comfortable managing. And so that's different space for everybody. It's a different level for everybody, and being in your studio and getting yourself oriented to where you are in there will give you some idea about what your personal level is when you've really got too much and you have to clear out. There's always supplies that come from when you started the craft, or when you tried a new technique, or when you bought a new supply and you bought a bunch of stuff and then you didn't like it, or when you were learning, you used less expensive materials, less quality materials, and those can always be given away to somebody new that's trying to learn, because they don't want to invest the same level of money that you've invested at this point into your craft. Whatever it takes for you to dial it down to a level where you feel like it's manageable to you. And once you've done that, once it's back down below the threshold, you're going to feel creative again. You're not going to be afraid of the room. You're going to not feel like you have too much stuff. That's the bottom line. Then when you go into the next show and you go wandering through the next show, you're going to be able to be more conscious as you shop about what you really need to take home. That is the short version of what I have to say. As a crafter, I know that we always want to buy more, and we always want our house to expand to fit it. And everybody's house is different, and so you're going to be constrained by your own house and your own space. There is some help that you can make by organizing it and having different containers and adding in better furniture and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, how much you keep and whether you've got more than you can manage is totally a function of at what point does your brain shut down. and what can you do to get back behind that line. And usually it is fondling the stuff and letting some things go out of the studio again. And it doesn't have to be that you fondle the stuff and make it all beautiful in there. And if you're that person that likes to work in the chaos, you just need to dial it back until the chaos is not shutting you down anymore. And if you're the person that wants to be super organized, then you're going to dive in real comfortably and put things away easily, and then you'll be below threshold again and you'll be ready to go. I see a question. I'm going to read it. Just give me a second here. So even if I know I probably have too much, I bought it because I liked it, so I don't want to get rid of it. I recently moved and I don't fit into my new space. I hear what you're saying about that. How do I choose what to pitch? All right. So actually the fact that you moved is going to help you with that, because you had to box it all up and now you're going to have to unbox it. So you've touched it twice and you can make value judgments. I like A better than B. I like B better than C. You know, you can say this one is super important to me and this one's less important to me. And as you're trying to decide what's going to fit in your space, you want to start with the stuff that's most important to you. Because truthfully, as artists, and I say this all the time, as artists, we see the potential in all things. It's all really beautiful to us, right? It's all going to look good to you no matter what. But there's the supplies that you're going to pick to use first. Most often, they're your most favorites. Make sure you get all those in first and then see what's left. And it may be that if you run out of space before you run out of materials, the stuff that didn't get into the room are the ones that are the least likely for you to be using, and then the highest potential for you to send them on. And part of what you have to be okay with is the idea that sure, you could use them and you could use all the supplies, but are you actually ever going to let the less important supplies come to the top of the list, because you've always got more important supplies that are going to be more interesting to you? So the ones that are less exciting to you will probably be super exciting to some other artist. So you can pass them on to somebody for whom those supplies will be at the top of the list, and they'll make that person super, super excited.
Gayle, let me jump in
ahead.
a second. I was going to suggest too that this might be a place where the sorting algorithms we've talked about a couple of times in the last few months could come into play. When you've got, it's all stuff that you really like and you feel a lot of emotional connection to the stuff, you can get some distance from the emotion by making some rules for yourself and say, okay, I'm going to keep the stuff that cost more than such and such a number. Yeah,
right?
I'm going to keep the things that I bought in the last 3 months. I'm going to keep everything that's made of wool. I'm going to keep all of the glass beads, but not the such and such.
Right.
Make some rules, make a few rules, and make one pass through all your stuff following just those rules, and set all that stuff aside. And then if you still have some more room, then you can consider what you value the next most highly and apply another rule. But you know, the rules can take some of the emotion out,
some of the pressure off. And he's right. The idea of you know, here I'm going to pick I'm going to go through and find all of the really, really expensive, wonderful things. The ones that, you know, in my case, it would be the lampwork glass that I spent $40 on one bead. Like, that bead's probably staying. But then there's other stuff that I bought in bulk or on a sale or whatever. I had a moment of inspiration and now it's gone. You will find that their importance to you will shift over time. And like I said, you have to remember that as an artist, you are not going to develop all the ideas in the universe and have them come to fruition. You're going to try, but you're not going to be able to use all your supplies in your lifetime. So you might as well pass them on to someone else so that those little lonely supplies get used on something, right? They become part of somebody's project. Just remember that the rules are arbitrary, right? You're making up your own rules, and you're trying to give yourself some ways to slice a layer off of the onion and try to, do it a piece at a time. And so if the first rule is I spent, the 24 karat gold plated blah, 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 or stay in, the stuff that I got from India is stuff that I'm more likely to let go of. In terms of price, those rules will really help you prioritize your items according to how important they are to you. And then the ones that are less important, it isn't that you don't love them, it isn't that you don't think they're cool, but they're not as important as other things. And so they can be shunted off to somebody else, right? And make somebody else happy.
Gail, Joe says, I've been trying to separate the type of craft, beads, scrapbooking, stamping, rock art, ornaments, etc. So maybe not everything goes in one room.
If you are blessed with the ability to put more than one craft and like have separate crafts in different rooms, awesome. That would be super helpful. If you have a studio and you want to have more than one craft in that studio, then you probably want to create working stations for each craft. Like here's the sewing machine where you're going to do quilting, and on this table and over on this table is your paper station. I had a client who did hot and cold metal work. So she had some cold connecting work that she did with metal, and she had some stuff that she was doing hot. Things were getting melted, things were getting soldered, that kind of stuff. And so we made a hot and a cold metal station for her. The tools were different. There was a little crossover, but not all of it. And when she was ready to do one thing, she wanted those supplies there. When she was going to do the other version, she wanted the other supplies there. You can compartmentalize your room into categories, and if each one of those compartments might be a craft. If I know people that have the whole house and all the kids have left, and each child that left, they got a second and a third craft room out of it. So, if you have the space, awesome.
I overlooked a comment from Diana who says this topic perfectly describes my recording studio.
Your recording studio. You should give me some more details. What are you recording? You're recording your voice? You're recording videos?
We'll give her a chance to reply, but in the meantime, I will also read another one from Joe. Let's talk about idea books. I have tons that I've accumulated, and I think, oh, I'll pitch these, but when I pull them to choose which ones, I love them all. But there's so much inspiration out on the internet. What do? Keep the books or lose them? Your own studio, you've put them in there. They have their space, but they get a very limited space.
Yeah, I do have a couple of collections of boxes that have instructions in them, and a couple of binders that have instructions in them. And then my housemate is the one that has all of the craft books, and she has the end of her craft table has little bookshelves in it, and so she limits herself to what fits into the bookshelves. When I'm talking about organizing a studio, books are always something that, while you're working on a project, you're working in one or two books, you're following a set of instructions, or you're looking at a photograph in order to mirror the color palette, or you're not going to have 15 books open while you work on project A. You're going to have a couple. So it isn't always necessary to keep all of those craft books in the craft room. You might have some favorites that you go to for inspiration all the time, but otherwise you're going to pull out the couple that you need for this project, and the rest of them are going to wait until the next time when you're on to the next thing. So A, you can not keep all the books in the craft room. You can keep them somewhere else. And B, you're suffering from artist syndrome, in which everything is inspiration, right? This is the essential problem of being a crafty person, being creative, in that you see creativity everywhere in all things, and the colors all look cool, and the pictures all look great, and this is going to inspire you, and it's all going to catch your attention and seem like it's swirling creative ideas because of that. And so, one, you should know that about yourself, and know that you will never be without inspiration, right? Like there's no way that you're not going to be able to, in a moment of desire, find something to be creatively inspiring. And so I would, again, set parameters, just like Ed was talking about, run an algorithm. I like this book better than that one. I like this book better than that one. And, you know, divvy it up. Am I more likely to look at this one, or am I more likely to look at that one? There's going to be some, even though they're all inspiring, there's going to be some level of prioritizing you can do. Put away the ones that are super inspiring, and then ask yourself, if this was my library of creativity and creative inspiration, would it be enough to answer the call when I needed some support and wanted to go look for inspiration? If it's enough, then you can say, okay, these are all also creatively inspiring, but they're not at the top of my list, so I'm going to go let them inspire somebody else. And know that if you someday your library comes up short, you go get on the internet, you go visit your friend's library, you go to the actual library and look for books, you go to a store and look at their books. I mean, you have to trust that you can get access to them all. You will never run out of ideas. There will always be something for you to look at, and you're just looking for the parameter of books that you can live with and feel comfortable managing. As long as you can manage them, okay, keep them. But I'm guessing because you're asking the question, you're feeling overwhelmed. And it might be that, like I had, when Ed moved, he got rid of a whole bunch of books all at once, but most clients that I work with, just regular books that they read, when I suggest to them that they reduce the book volume, they always panic. And then I say, okay, just go over to the bookshelf and look for 10%. Stand and look at that shelf, and they'll go, oh, well, I'm not going to read that again. Like they start pulling books out. Do they get rid of 50% of them? No, but they might get rid of 10% of them. And that 10% gives you a little breathing room. You might want to also look at your crafty books in that way. Can I take 10% of them away and give them to one of my artist friends who might need it and be short, or somebody new that might need them and be inspired by them? It's just a matter of getting it down to a volume where you feel comfortable and like you can manage them, and you have some place to put them, and you don't have to struggle to find them or get in and out of them. That's a big important thing.
I would think too that someone who's done numerous crafts, one question you could ask as you're evaluating your craft book collection is, am I ever going to do this thing again? You know, you might have moved on past spinning yarn. You know, you tried that once, but you're never going to do it again. It was fun, but now you're content to do your knitting and weaving with store-bought yarn. So let the spinning books go. You know, there's probably something in there that you're not going to use again.
Well, and if you think of them as expanding and contracting interests, sometimes crafters will say to me, I haven't done that for 20 years, but that doesn't mean I won't do it in the future. Okay, but if you haven't done it for 20 years, clearly it's not on your radar right now. So shrink that population down to a small enough kit that you could start up again if you were so inclined, and you could go and replenish supplies. But if you suddenly wanted to pick up a craft that you hadn't been doing for 20 years, maybe you want to keep the really expensive specialty tool that goes with it. Maybe you want to keep the supplies that you invested a whole lot, like the really expensive supplies or the really high quality supplies. Maybe instead of 500 sheets of this paper, you only want to keep 25 sheets of this paper. And you see what I'm saying? Like, you can think of them as a, you know, here's the lung while it's full, and here's the lung while it's contracted, right? You can shrink down a craft that you're not into anymore to a starting kit of the really rich stuff, the expensive stuff, and the specialty tools, and let the bulk of the supplies for that craft go on to somebody who's doing it now. And then that's enough for you to get started up again if you suddenly get the desire, and keep you going while you go and add supplies again in the future. It's just a matter of managing your space, right? You don't want to keep an homage to a craft you don't care about anymore, taking up good space for a craft that you do care about. And so shrink it down into a collection and label it and stick it in the closet somewhere and free up the space for the stuff you're doing now.
Gail, Diana answered our question. She said, I record videos using dolls. Baby Alive and 18-inch dolls are my newest project.
So that means that your recording studio is a wreck because of all the dolls and all the stuff that's going on with the dolls. Yeah, I can imagine. And resetting that space so that it's clean for you to record something new would be super important. This is the, we don't clean up after ourselves like we did in kindergarten syndrome. When, when you're in first grade and second grade, you have an attention span of a gnat, right? And so they constantly change the stuff that you're doing. Every 20 minutes, they're making us you were doing something different. But the teacher was always saying, okay, we're going to put this one away and we're going to move on to the next one, right? And if you're in the studio and you're drowning, you may want to stop and, reset that area before you start again. And working it into your plan for the day, for your recording plans, is I'm going to record this video with these dolls and stuff, and then I need to go put the stuff away and pull the fresh batch out for the next one, and have that, give yourself that hour or 30 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever to put stuff away before you pull again. Because I think at some point they all start to blend together and you can't keep up anymore. And it doesn't take, I'm sure 2 recordings and the room is a wreck after 2 of them. I'm sure it's like, if you get all that stuff out, it's going to make a big chaos that you got to get your hands wrapped around again.
Joe, in response to your discussion of craft books, said, great idea. If I take the books out, that gives me more room. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And Ginger,
bookshelves can be anywhere, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Ginger says, this talk is inspiring me to declutter my craft supplies closet, to cull out the non-craft stuff stashed there. It's become my Monica closet.
What do you mean by my Monica closet?
I think that's a Friends reference, but I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Oh, like where she hid everything? Yeah, you don't want to, the more into crafting and being an artist and being creative you become, the less willing you are to surrender your space to dual purpose. Like, this is where the luggage is as well as the crafting. No. You start having to move that stuff out and make the room 100% about your crafting. And that's, that's how you're stepping up, like your obsession, your interest is becoming an obsession, is when, okay, now I need to take over this entire square footage and the closet and the walls, and everything else has to be out of here. Like, give me more room to make my things happen. Yeah, I totally get it. I've hid stuff there from other declutter sessions. Okay. So do you think you've hid creative things there, or have you hid other things from other parts of the house? It might be that in order to keep your craft room dedicated and workable, you need to be more brutal with yourself about what you keep versus what you let go. Like, clearly crafting is becoming more important to you, and you're willing to dedicate more to your square footage to that process. And so that means that some of the stuff that you're hiding back there, probably you need to have that conversation with yourself and say, do I really need to give up craft room space for this, or can I just take that to Goodwill? Can I let that go? It might be time to let it go, right? It's delayed decisions, she says. Yes, this is the nature of clutter, right? It's all delayed decisions. And here's the thing. Being creative is, for people that are drawn to being creative, being artistic in some way, it is very stress relieving. It's very soothing. It's very enriching. It's a pursuit that exercises a part of your mind that you don't do while you're running errands and you're cooking dinner and you're taking care of the kids. Like, it's a whole different process to sit down and be isolated and focused on, I'm going to create something out of nothing, and I'm going to use these tools that I think are fun to touch and play with and look at. And at the end, I'm going to have something fabulous that I did all by myself. And that is a very enriching experience. And as you add that into your life, other things become less important, right? And so there is junk in the house that is getting in the way, and you can let it go. That's what I'm saying. Go into some area of the house that has been neglected and go to the linen closet, go to a closet in another room and jump in and say, do I really need all this stuff in here? Because I don't have time for that. I'm not playing with those 47 sets of sheets. I want to go in here and be creative. So lighten your load some other way if your crafting is going to expand to fill a studio area. What is that one, Ed?
Joe asked, do you recommend one working surface, like one table, or multiple? Okay, I'm wondering if I'm causing more problems because I have multiple surfaces to mess up, but it's nice to emboss over here and scrapbook over there, etc.
Well, that sort of goes into the idea that depending on the state, like setting up stations of different categories of work. When you're doing embossing, you're using one set of tools. When you're doing, cutting, you're doing something else. It might be easier for you if you think of your craft studio as sort of an assembly line and you're working from station to station to get your finished product. If that thought process is easier for you, then that's how you should do it. If my idea about a clean working surface is just that everybody that's working on projects all the time, they make a big mess while they're creating, and then they walk away and come back and they keep working on that. But when it's finished, they have the finished product and they have a wrecked workspace. And that means that when they get the next inspiration or they bring home the next instructions or they take the next class, they don't have a clean place to sit down and get started right away. And sometimes people tell me it takes me an hour and a half to clean up my studio so I can get started, and then my creative urge has passed. And so just having every night when you go to bed, every day when you are in their studio and you are going to go out, give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to dial up and put away the project that you're on and leave one surface at least for you to dive into. And then if the other surfaces, your other stations along the way are not as straight, you'll at least have one place clean to start. And I think that gives you some, clean brain time as well. If you sit down at a fresh surface to start your work, it just makes it easier. You don't get derailed by, I can't see my table. I don't know where the scissors are. I can't get started. It makes you feel like you're tripping at the starting gate instead of just jumping out of the block and going. So that's my idea. But if you're doing multiple things, then you can have multiple stations for the various stages if that's how you like to work.
It's probably also a good time to mention the idea you've said in other places on other videos about organizing by project, using project boxes or some kind of containers, so that everything you need for a particular project is easy to whisk away and bring back out.
Yes, thank you. Because some people, I don't do that very well. Like I don't jump from project to project simultaneously. I'm not comfortable working on a whole bunch of different ones at once, and I don't get bored with one and want to go do another one. But I have had people tell me that they like to have 4 or 5 projects going simultaneously because they get sick of this one and they come over here, and then they get sick of that one and they come over here, and jumping back and forth between the projects really works for them creatively. And so project boxes are really important so that when you stop project A at the end of the night, you put all the pieces that go with it into that box and close it and put it away, put it aside, put it on wherever the shelf is for project boxes. That means that you can go to project 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when you're ready to come back to project 1, you know where all the pieces are, you know where the thread color is that you're using, you know where the beads are that you pulled. I mean, jumping from project to project means that by the time you get back to the third one back, you've forgotten what you know, what other bead you were going to pull out for this. It's hard to jump around if you don't corral the content somehow. And so having a project box that is specific to the projects that you don't use for other things, like don't use the same boxes for projects that you do for supplies, make it a unique box that is visually to you, that's a project box. And when you see that box, you know that has a project in it that I'm in the middle of working on. And then you can close down your 37 projects at once and have them all be over there. And then when it's time to go spend the afternoon with your friends, you can go grab a box and you're ready to go and start working right away. So it's just a way for you to not lose the pieces that you need. You don't lose the instructions that way. And it allows you to jump between projects and projects quickly and, you know, not be going, oh my God, what happened to that thread that I was using? I can't find it. And then you can't even do anything because you can't find the thread to start. That's what I'm saying. What else is down there?
Ginger said, and this is in the conversation about the craft closet, I'm pulling it out today off to Goodwill and recycling.
Yay!
And then Joe added, I'm still working on setting up that too small craft room and want multiple surfaces, but it's hard in a small room.
Yes, it is. So then instead of having, well, how do I say this? Instead of having 6 steps, combine them into 3 steps. So maybe some of the cutting and embossing can be together, and maybe the second station can be something, you know what I'm saying? Like if you've got it subsetted down to 6 steps, maybe you can thin it down to 3 instead. And it may be that your room is too small for that, and you're really going to have one working surface, and you're going to have embossing supplies in a box or in a, you know, tower with shelves, and you're going to have the other steps in containers and a third step in containers, and you're going to have to pull containers up and down onto your one working surface to do it. That may be the better thing if you're really trapped with an issue with square footage, that you make your steps portable and movable. The surface is one surface and your steps go up and down from, you know, box to box. That might make it easier for you.
Well, and you can also, another way to think about it is to sort of prioritize by what involves the most setup time and effort. And so if there's a piece of equipment that's you don't want to have to keep taking down and setting up, dedicate space for that, and then consolidate the other activities on the general purpose table. Yeah. Or if there's one place that has the good lighting you need to do this particular step, dedicate that to that step.
Yeah.
Put everything else in the multi-purpose space.
Yeah. And like my client that was doing hot and cold metal work, like the hot metal work required a specific surface, and it required ventilation, it required goggles, and, you know, like things could catch on fire at the hot station, right? So, you know, that might be a station that you want to set up and make safe, and then you don't take down because it's set up so that you can safely and correctly use the materials. The cold station, the house isn't gonna burn to the ground in the cold station, and so if she had space issues, she could have made that one go up and down, for instance. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Ginger added, I craft mostly on my kitchen table. I use trays to keep my project contained. Then cool. I can put it away easily without losing my place.
Awesome, that's good. Trays work.
And Joe added, I'm very ADHD, and so I do have multiple projects at one time, but also means disorganized.
Thanks you guys for chatting with me so much. I'm so grateful that everybody wanted to jump in and chat with me today. I love having these conversations about crafty things. The thing about being organized and crafty is that you can organize it as much as you need to or as little as you need to in order to feel like you can function and it doesn't get in your way. And that's all you're really aiming for. As long as you feel like you can find your stuff and be happy, and you're not frustrated and gnashing your teeth because I don't know where the scissors are. You know, if you're not stressed about it, if you're happy going whoosh, knocking it on the floor, you know, good on you. I couldn't do that. That would make my head explode. But, you know, you only need to organize to your level of comfort. And and recognize that even somebody who is comfortable in chaos still has a threshold. And when you reach that threshold where it's turning off your creativity and you don't want to play anymore, then you need to do something about it. Then it's time to dial it down to a place where you're more comfortable. That's really the issue that I wanted to put out for everybody. So I think that
We
we're
are
out
about
of time.
out of time, yeah.
Great.
I want to let everybody know that our next in-person event will be on Thursday, October 25th at 7 p.m. at a Healing Collective in Houston.
Love to meet you. If you're in Houston, please feel free to drop in anytime.
And our next online Clutter Conversation event will be on Tuesday, November 27th at 12:01 p.m. Central Time. And we'll announce topics for those events soon. If you'd like to receive notifications about upcoming events, you can join the Meetup group at meetup.com/Houston-Clutter-Coaching. You can also follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our mailing list. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us your questions and topic suggestions in the YouTube comments, and you can also reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you coming. Talk to you soon.